We are back in Mammoth Cave National Park today, where we have just spoke with Ranger Chris Clark.
Ranger Clark shared with us so much about the history of Floyd Collins, his days of exploration, his days of entrapment, and it's so many fascinating things we think you'll want to know too. We hope you listen along.
I'm currently a park guide here at Mammoth Cave. Normally it's guiding tours, educating visitors, whether it's through hikes or cave tours. Sometimes I'll even help out like our science and resource division when it's time to do like bat monitoring, whether that's winter or summer, whatever the need may be. And just generally trying to bring Mammoth Cave to the world.
Yeah, we appreciate that. We think it is certainly a national treasure. How long have you been with the park?
I've been here 12 years.
Okay. And in that 12 years, you have become the home to a lot of Floyd Collins information.
Yes.
So we would love, we're here today at, well, I'll let you tell us where we're here, where we are.
This is the Collins homestead. And we've got Floyd Collins' house over here. We've got the ticket office. This is pretty much where Floyd kind of grew up.
Okay.
And when he got older and moved out on his own, he had a house down the ridge a couple hundred yards.
Okay.
But he was still on the family farm, technically.
Okay. Interesting. So this is his homestead. This is where his parents raised him.
Yes.
Okay. I didn't realize that.
Now, there was some times where the Collins family did move around some. There was some period of time, and I'm not sure of the years of that, but I know that Lee Collins moved the family to Oklahoma for a very short period of time.
Okay.
He did bring back with him some peach seedlings, peach tree seedlings, and pecan seedlings, and planted them out here. And I know that Bill Austin, who ran Kentucky Down Under, he and his wife Judy, they had the Austin house, which is no longer here, but Bill spent thousands of dollars trying to prop up that
Austin
pecan
house.
the pecan tree. That was the last tree left that they knew had been planted by Lee Collins. And he had arborists out trying to save that tree, and it just, for all the money that was put into it, it was a good effort, but in the long run, it still failed.
Well, isn't that interesting how our travels can change the places we ultimately call home?
Absolutely.
And so they lived here they have a long history here.
Yes.
And Floyd, and there's a cave here as well.
There is.
Which is what the ticket office is here for.
Just about 100 yards behind the ticket office here is the entrance to Crystal Cave, which Floyd had discovered back in 1917.
So was the Collins family, were they farmers? I mean, is that what they did here on the
primarily it was farming. That was their main goal or main purpose in life, was farming. Floyd, though, in his sort of spare time or his free time, which I know there wasn't a great deal of it, you're trying to eke out an existence here. Floyd would oftentimes get off by himself, and he would explore the rock shelters along Green River. He would find a hole in the ground somewhere out in the woods, and if he could get an arm and a head to go, he went on in. And that's kind of what happened with the discovery here of Crystal Cave. The story that I've seen the most talked about how Floyd had a trap line. He had steel traps out. He was trying to get pelts, anything to make money. And one of the traps had slipped down into the bottom of a sinkhole. And he went down to retrieve it and felt the air coming out. He went in, crawled, and pushed his way through for a couple 100 feet, and he was standing up. And he spent the rest of his time just seeing what was going on down there.
Okay.
He came out somewhere around 11 o'clock, I think it was, ran into the house, told the family, get up, let me show you what I found.
Wow.
And I can imagine this family in their bedclothes crawling through these tiny little holes just to see what had been found.
And so was that the beginning of Floyd's love for exploration?
He had a love of exploration from the time he was probably a teenager.
Okay.
We know he was in the rock shelters. He was gathering up artifacts. He was selling those at the front step of the Mammoth Cave Hotel. He had a fellow that visited from New York that had met him in the around 1898. This fellow from Buffalo, his name was Edmund Turner. And Edmund's talking to him about, hey, I see you got a lot of things here. Could you find me something in particular? And Floyd's like, what do you want? How about a skull? Yep, I got it. He goes, well, send it to this address. And that kind of began a friendship with them. Even though Edmund Turner leaves Kentucky for a number of years, he comes back about 1910, and we see him and Floyd, they rekindle this friendship because Floyd's still sitting selling his wares. And they opened up a small cave just on the north side of the river called Dossy Domes Cave. And there was a little grocery or a little general store over there that was run by the Dossy family. And you could get a cave tour there anytime between the hours of like 4 p.m. and 10 p.m. nightly.
Wow.
Because he also had a small cave on this property, which Green River is just over the hillside here. And it was called Cathedral Cave.
Okay.
And he was trying to get people interested with that being closer to the historic Mammoth Cave. Maybe get them interested and direct them over here to that little cave.
Interesting.
It was here on the family farm.
So there's 2 caves on this property?
There are multiple
caves on this property. Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting. But 2 that Floyd was actively working
Yes.
to get tourists to try to
Absolutely.
come and visit. And he's selling his wares.
And selling his wares.
So, Floyd, how many children were in the Collins family? How many siblings? Do you know how many they had?
5 or 6, if I remember correctly.
Okay, but
I may be wrong on that.
Floyd was obviously this explorer / entrepreneur that
Yes.
just was tenacious about whatever.
Absolutely.
I love the description of if he could get an arm and a head in, he would go.
Sometimes referred to as the human groundhog.
Okay.
Because of his ability to get in such small
Okay.
places.
Okay.
Yeah. So he did that for a number of years. He was developing the visitation at these 2 caves, working with a friend at another cave, finding wares
Yes.
and selling them, and then kind of take us to where he was then when Sand Cave happened.
When you look at the time from the latter part of the 1800s, like that last decade of the 1800s, early 2 or 3 decades of the 1900s, it was kind of a tumultuous time here.
Okay.
Most of the families that had settled in what is now Mammoth Cave National Park, these were families that had descended from Revolutionary War soldiers that were given land title or land grants here. These families came in, they started harvesting the timber to build homes, barns, fencing, ties for the railroads that were about to start coming into the area.
Okay.
They were also clearing this land as they were cutting those timbers,
Sure.
and they were starting to raise some crops. Unfortunately, this area is pretty poor rocky ground. They were able to sustain themselves for a number of years, but you look into that late 1800s, early 1900s, most of this good farmland is gone. It's not yielding like it once did. These families subsisted by raising gardens. Those gardens weren't yielding as much anymore. They had hunted the game off of here. Deer and turkey no longer, existed in this area. Everything you see today has been reintroduced.
Okay.
And like I said, the good timber was gone, so their monetary value for survival was almost eliminated. Somebody started taking notice of what was happening at Mammoth Cave in that last decade of the 1800s.
Okay.
They've done nothing but show people a hole in the ground, essentially. And everyone else is like, oh, I've got one. I've got a cave out back. I wonder if somebody would pay me to see it. That created this cave war that was so prominent in this area for a number of years. And everyone wanted their piece of the pie, and they tried to capitalize on Mammoth Cave being that draw for the area.
So the cave wars really began in
Late 1800s and early 1900s. Floyd, this Crystal Cave out here, cathedral cave out here that he was trying to get people interested in coming and seeing. This was so far off that beaten path. That is one of the things that was the demise of many smaller caves in this area. But Crystal Cave, he knew, was the true gold mine.
Oh, they say it's beautiful. We haven't been in.
It is gorgeous in its right. I will say that some of the largest passageways, I believe, that are in Mammoth Cave can be seen right through
Wow,
here.
that's a big statement. But Sand Cave would have location,
That was
location,
You
right?
You had to pass by Sand Cave to get to even the new entrance to Mammoth Cave, which was opened in 1921.
Okay.
You would have gone, and that would have taken you the route into Mammoth Cave itself, the old historic Mammoth Cave. But you got Sand Cave, which is the first on the line, or one of the first on the line. So he thought, if I can just get somebody in here and get them interested in it, once again, they'll be more apt to go to this cave. He made a mistake, a fatal mistake. He had gone in towards the end of January. It has snowed terribly during the early parts of January. He is squeezing through passageways that, once again, most humans couldn't get through. But he just had a knack for how he could contort his own body to get into places. And the story was always told that he had dropped through this small passageway into this large room. And he told everyone that the walls were blackened, which made him feel like that this must have been something significant that prehistorically people had utilized.
Okay.
Because it looked very similar to some of what was being seen inside the historic Mammoth Cave area.
Okay.
His lantern started faltering, whether running out of fuel or what. And so he starts trying to climb back out of the same passageway he'd come through. He knew on his way in there was a rock he needed to avoid at all cost. He accidentally tipped his lantern over and it went out. Now, this is not just some normal size hole. If you could think about yourself trying to squeeze through a small road culvert with a lot of sharp edges, snags,
and rocks you want to avoid.
He accidentally displaced that rock in fighting, trying to get himself up. He just couldn't reach. It was so small he couldn't just reach in his pocket, get out another match where he light his lantern.
Yeah.
So he was going to have to struggle it blindly. And he, like I said, he dislodged that rock. And it came down and it settled across his foot, which was sitting between two other rocks. So it actually didn't break anything, but it was just kind of hanging on to him and not letting him go. Earlier this year, I'd never seen this before, but earlier this year, I had someone mention that, what got him trapped was he couldn't get his boot off. I'm like, well, explain. And I don't know how you all were, but I can remember as a kid when you got a pair of lace-up boots, usually the strings were about 3 times longer than they should have been.
Sure.
And we always tied them behind, wrapped them around behind and then tied them. And there's been some indication as to that happened. And that's what trapped him ultimately. Because if he hadn't have done that, he would have probably been able to have slipped his foot out and come right on through. And I've been doing a little bit more research with like our curatorial division here. And our curator said there's a small article that is in our collection. She says, unfortunately, it's not here right now. But she says that talks about him having probably laced his strings behind his ankle, and that was the cause of his death. She said, but there's no context with this article. It doesn't tell you which paper. It doesn't tell you when it took place or when it was written. But she says it is in newsprint of the era.
Wow.
So,
how many times have we done that?
All our lives.
yeah, exactly.
Daily.
Yeah.
Never would have thought about that. How interesting. So here he was. He wasn't really crushed, Bones
Nope.
really weren't broken,
Nope.
but a combination of 3 rocks had him
That's it.
trapped.
That is it.
And then everyone tried to get him out. And
Oh.
then everyone wanted to hear about the stories of what was happening each day as they were trying to get him out. And it just became this worldwide sensation.
This was one of the 3 biggest stories of young radio that had just come onto the scene. The 3 biggest stories of 1925 was Charles Lindbergh's crossing of the Atlantic,
Big news.
the kidnapping of the Lindbergh baby, and the entrapment of Floyd Collins. This had such an impact that Congress was stopping sessions daily to hear the radio updates coming out of Cave City.
Wow.
And probably his entrapment is ultimately what led to the development of Mammoth Cave as a national park. So,
Interesting.
So that incident was instrumental then.
it was at least a catalyst.
Yeah.
Because the state of Kentucky had approached the federal government at least twice before. I know 1900 they'd asked Congress to make Mammoth Cave a national park, and Congress was like, no. I don't know the exact year, but there seems like there's one more incident of where they had approached Congress and said, hey. And Congress was like, no. Now you've got Floyd entrapped. It's playing out. It's big news. Newspapers, radio, everyone's carrying it. And you've got still these people out there that are trying to make money off of caves, and they're doing it by some of the worst business practices out there. I mean, rival cave guides were getting into fistfights out in public. There's at least one account of a shooting that took place. Road signs getting cut down in the middle of the night.
Wow. So when
Cappers.
Cappers.
So when you say cave war, I mean it's
It truly was a war.
literally.
It true, but that was because everyone was fighting for any money
Sure.
around here.
Yeah.
It was survival.
It was scrappy, tenacious,
Absolutely.
persistent. Look at us, look at us.
Exactly.
And so with the daily story on the radio of Floyd's entrapment, I'm sure all of this information about what Mammoth Cave was like was coming out, and that ultimately caught the eye then of our government to say,
Yes.
perhaps it is a national treasure that should be protected. And
From what I understand, the state of Kentucky approached Congress again, like in 1926, and said,
okay,
this is going to continue. There's going to be people still dying unless we do something and end it. And if we can make Mammoth Cave a national park, that will at least help
oh, okay,
to slow and end this.
interesting. A great sales pitch.
Yeah, well, absolutely.
End cave wars in one of your states by
Exactly.
how interesting. I had never heard that part of the history. That's really cool. So let's go back to Floyd in the cave.
Okay.
So January 30th, 1925,
Exactly.
he's trapped.
He is trapped, and he did try to free himself. He was not uncommon to getting at least somewhat trapped in caves. Well, there was one other occasion where he was trapped, and they were able to get him free.
So this was not his first
No,
rodeo.
no, this was not his first rodeo by any means. And this one, though, he seemed to have a sense of urgency. Like he knew he was in a bad place. He was found the following morning.
Okay.
There evidently was a pretty bad thunderstorm and a lot of rain that happened overnight.
Okay.
There were
And you said it had been snowing.
It had been snowing. Now you've got the rain showing up. So it's just making everything
Miserable,
around Sand Cave
Cold,
just
wet.
a mess.
Yeah.
There were the 2 people or 3 people that owned the property, which Sand Cave would have probably been on, because they knew that it had to go somewhere under these properties. Floyd had made an agreement with them. Put me up for the night, feed me, when I'm doing exploration. And if it turns out that there's anything here, we can get it open, great. I'll split the profits 50-50 with you. The two of the farmers are like, I wonder if he's underground. Has anybody seen Floyd? This is usually when he comes. And the next morning, Ed Estes sent his son Jewel down to the cave. And he says Floyd's jacket was hanging at the entrance. And then he gets to going down in there and slips and gets out of control and hits on Floyd. And he turns around and is like, what's going on here? And he says, I'm trapped. He said, go get my brothers, tell them I'm gonna fix here, and I need to get out of here. And Joel went and sounded the alarm. And it's kind of amazing too, because Floyd had struggled so much that when he was truly found, all you could see was just the tops of his shoulder and his head. That is also how unstable this passageway was he was in.
And he knew his brothers, since this was not his first rodeo, would have some idea of what to do.
Absolutely.
If anybody was going to help him, it'd probably be his brothers.
Marshall and Homer seemed to be the ones that were the most active in trying to get him out. Homer was living in Louisville, Kentucky at the time. He got word, got on the train, or I think he maybe had bought a new car and was driving it down. Jumped out of the car, still in his suit,
Went straight
right into
in.
the cave. Mm-hmm. And looking at a lot of the historical photographs, you see people, the workers that were digging, trying to get him out, in pretty fine clothes.
It was urgent.
It was. There was that sense of urgency.
Yeah. And this was their guy. He was one of them.
Exactly. And Homer and Marshall are, working themselves just into complete and total exhaustion.
Sure.
A couple days after his entrapment, it's already spreading. News is spreading. You're getting people showing up here wanting to know what's going on. And all they wanted to do was be left alone. Leave us alone.
We're going to figure this
and
out.
we will get him out. Mm-hmm. But people kept coming and kept coming. There was, on the 8th day of his entrapment, there's over 10,000 people.
You're kidding
out
me.
and around
Wow.
the entrance to Sandgate. Cars are abandoned along roadways. They're parked out in people's fields. You could get a hamburger. You get souvenirs, bootleg whiskey.
You
name
could
it,
find
you
it
get
all.
It was there.
Yeah.
Which is also kind of one of those points when you look at it and it's like, man, here's a guy struggling for his own survival, and you're out here trying to capitalize on this man that's stuck underground.
It's kind of a carnival atmosphere.
It was called Carnival Sunday.
Carnival Sunday.
Was how they referred to day 8. And it's a tragedy, but people were still, it was more than here's a guy trapped underground. This is a chance for us to make a little money to survive too.
Yeah.
So there's a negative to it, even though
They knew people were going to be there anyway,
they did.
right?
And they were
were
gonna
going to
need
have
services.
to eat, right?
Exactly.
And
if I can make anything, I'm going to.
yeah, again, going back to the tenacity of the community.
Right.
They knew what they had in the visitor,
Absolutely.
and that was a way to make a living.
Yep.
Fascinating. So everybody was trying,
Everyone was trying.
and maybe getting in the way. I don't know.
Definitely getting in the way. There was a lot of people that would, when the newspapers started showing up, you've got people that are coming out going, oh, he's dead. He's dead. And they talked about how they'd taken sandwiches and stuff into him, and that was mostly lies. Because they would get in there. They were too afraid to be in there. They would eat that sandwich, drink whatever they had, and they shoved it in a wall pocket there and would go out and tell all this story.
Oh, that's horrible.
There were others that said this is just a big publicity stunt, that he's got a back way out and he's going home sleeping in his own bed at night.
I had heard that was told as well. So the radio stations show up. The reporters show up. They're part of the carnival.
They are part of it.
And they are part of what you just described as, these tales that are being told about, well, I took food to Floyd, or he's exiting every night, and this is all staged. And Molly shared with us that there was a story of Floyd's girlfriend and his dog waiting for him outside, and which he didn't have a girlfriend and he didn't have a dog, right? So
Obie.
Obie, was that the dog?
Obie was waiting for him during the rescue, and then Obie disappeared.
Oh, well, as Obie would if he were fictionalized.
or was stolen.
Oh, well,
There's actual pictures of Obie with, I think, Homer
okay,
at the rescue. So he was actually there, but somebody took off with Obie.
I understand. So, but it became, everybody wanted to keep this. It behooved also the radio stations and the newspapers that needed to be sold to continue this story.
Oh, absolutely. And the more, not that anyone would sensationalize anything.
Never.
It's amazing some of the articles I've seen, because there's one article that shows a picture or a rendering, a drawing of what Floyd's predicament was. And they were saying that he has a 7-ton rock on his foot.
7 ton.
and he's in this big open area. He's just kind of laying on his stomach, but I mean, he's like in this big open area, and it's like, no.
Yeah.
No. If that was a 7-ton rock, he would already be dead.
Yeah.
So I don't guess that during this time there was a lot of professional search and rescue teams, people that were
Correct.
equipped to be able to go down there and dislodge the rock and free him.
Exactly.
So all of this was relatively new.
Oh,
Or non-existent.
the closest thing probably that anyone had that would be anywhere similar to this would be anyone working in the coal mines of that area. Because that's about the only other thing, or I shouldn't say coal mines, but mines in general. Here it would be coal mines for us, but somewhere else it may be a mineral mine.
Sure.
Gold or silver, copper. And you might have teams that have a little bit better experience with that, but not when you're talking about caves. This is a foreign thing. I came across some letters recently where there was a fellow from Kansas that had sent a letter talking about what they should do, how he had worked in the gold mines out west, and you ought to be able to sink this shaft or get this down to him. And as I continue reading the letter, he's going, well, it might work. So he's already doubting himself.
Yeah.
Sure.
So why would we try something that we don't know is going to work in the first place?
Yeah.
They knew. One of the suggestions that he made was to dig out a little bit of area around it, and you could do that by drilling a few holes and putting some sticks of dynamite in there.
Oh, that sounds like a great idea.
And if you're worried about it hurting him, Mr. Collins, you can put some planks up over it to keep it from sending the rock.
That should
on
solve
him.
the problem.
Oh,
Yeah.
it should solve it perfectly.
Yeah.
And it's just kind of amazing. But towards the end of that letter, he's like, I think it's already too late. And that reality.
But he still sends the letter.
But he still sends the letter.
Yeah.
And so I find that, even if people can't be here, they're trying to at least offer their suggestions.
Sure.
And one thing is for certain, you can never just discredit anything, because you don't know.
You don't know.
Somebody might send you something that you have not even considered before.
Right.
The whole rescue effort, because of where he was laying and how unstable that passage was, no one wanted to use dynamite. There was such a fear when they started with the rescue shaft that if they were to use dynamite, it would just completely collapse where Floyd was laying. So they were using hand drills to drill out through solid rock, working 24 hours a day. Just, you worked until you got so tired you couldn't go any further, and somebody else would pick up while you rested.
Yeah.
And there was one article in a paper that was trying to give hope, I think, that talked about how they were making they were making progress at about 1 foot an hour. The reality of it was about 4 inches an hour. And they had hoped that they could get to him. They're going to have to drill a shaft down almost 70 feet to get to him.
It's a lot of hours.
That's a lot of hours.
Wow.
And these men are out there. I mean, they're doing the work.
They're trying.
And
Sure.
it's a spirit that I don't know that we necessarily always see in today's era. But it didn't matter, stranger or not. Here you are.
Yeah.
You're going to try your best.
And at that rate and that tedious and hard work that must have been to build the shaft, it would have taken anybody who would have been willing to have tried for a little while.
Absolutely.
4 inches an hour is just keep it going,
So what was the cause of Floyd's death? The actual cause?
Exposure.
Exposure. So it wasn't being crushed by
No, there was
debris or...
one of the things. So on about day 2 or 3, when the media starts showing up, you got this young cub reporter from the Louisville Courier-Journal that comes down, named William Skeets Miller, and he was a very small-statured man who was able to get into where Floyd was. He is truly the one that was taking the food and the water and talking to Floyd. He was working at digging and trying to get him out at the same time. The last thing his editor had told him said, "Whatever you do, don't go into the cave." And here's Marshall and Homer sitting outside of the cave, and he's like, "What's the story, guys?" And they're like, "You want a story? Go get it yourself."
Yeah.
And in they go, and he goes. He managed to, with the help of others, get a light bulb hooked up. Took some burlap, wrapped around that. There was oilcloth that was put over the top of Floyd to divert water that had been dripping on him for over 12 hours. This light bulb was kind of placed up close to Floyd's head and neck to give him some warmth. It was also kind of tied into a light bulb that was rigged up outside of the cave entrance. And they were able to know that nothing had changed in there, because on about day 9 or 10 of this rescue effort, there's a collapse that shuts off them even having any communications with Floyd. One of the people said that he's okay. He should be fine. The bulb outside is tied into that. If the rocks had come down and shifted, it would have crushed the globe on the light, which would have meant that the rocks had crushed Floyd's head. Everything's good. Day 13 is when the light bulb went out. Probably just a light bulb that failed.
Yeah.
That was inside. And that's when that coolness finally started overtaking him. Yeah. Not being able to move around, you're just laying there. Your moments are numbered at that point.
You're in the elements in the winter.
You're there.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And at that point, the shaft was not completed.
It was not complete. It took another 3 days, or from the time the light went out, it took another 3 days. So 16 days. Day 16 is when they break through to where he is laying. And they send the doctor down to check on Floyd. And he comes out and tells the family, "I'm sorry. It's too late." And he was in such a predicament. The rescue shaft that was being done was very unstable. When Carnival Sunday hit, things were completely out of hand. The sheriff and deputy in Cave City, that was all the law that was in the area. They were unable to control this mob.
There's
Men
no
were
way
they were getting drunk and getting into fist fights.
Yeah.
Out here that had nothing to do, that had never been in the cave, more than likely. They declared martial law here and brought in the National Guard to keep the peace. They strung up barbed wire. They had the guards out here, and is like, "Nope, unless you're doing something with the rescue, you are not allowed in here. And if you went through that fenced area, you're going to work. You're not going to go to Gawk." So,
I didn't really.
yeah.
We didn't know that. Part either.
Yep. He that kind of brought a little order to everything, which was helpful, but it was still a lot of work. The general Denhart that was over that effort, when they found out that Floyd was dead, he's like, look, he goes, this is not a rescue. This is a recovery.
Yeah.
And we're not going to risk anybody else's life. And if you want your son out, you're going to have to find a way on your own. That the decision was made to fill that shaft back in. They held a funeral service right there at the entrance of the cave, and Floyd laid there for about 6 weeks.
Okay.
Floyd's dad, Lee Collins, and his brother Homer went out on the vaudeville circuit,
Okay.
which was big at that time. They were talking about the experience in the rescue leading up to, the events leading up to Floyd's entrapment, the rescue. And what they were doing was raising money to be able to
bring
get
him
someone
out.
that could actually get him out. And it was some local coal miners from a couple counties over that got him out finally, to where he got his second funeral.
Okay.
Floyd, right at the end of this ticket office, just out in the edge of the woods, was where Floyd was buried.
Okay. Is there a
His real burial, so to speak.
Okay.
Okay.
What, is there a family cemetery there, or is
Nope.
that just where they decided?
I'm talking about 100 feet from where we're standing,
Okay.
or
Okay.
where we're sitting, is where he was originally buried.
Okay.
Now, things kind of were, pretty rough still, because we're getting ready to get closer and closer to the Depression, even though we're a couple of years ahead of it. Lee Collins was approached by H.B. Thomas, and Dr. Thomas came over and said, I'd like to buy the cave. And Dr. Thomas was kind of getting into this whole cave mogul ownership thing. He was really into it. He loved the adventure of it. He owned Hidden River Cave there in Horse Cave. He owned Mammoth Onyx Cave in Horse Cave as well. And he wanted to put this crown jewel in his collection. And he offered Lee Collins a substantial amount of money for that time, $10,000. And Lee sold the cave.
And the entire property?
Well, the entire property and all the rights thereunto,
Okay.
which meant anything underground, including Floyd.
Yes.
Yeah.
Dr. Thomas had Floyd dug up and put him into Crystal Cave. There was a glass top put on his casket. And when you took a tour, I think the signs out on the roads actually said, come cave with Floyd Collins, the discoverer of Crystal Cave. And when you walk down into the cave, the first big room, there's Floyd, his headstone, right there.
And Floyd stayed there
For a couple of years.
Okay.
And then someone broke into the cave and stole Floyd. And it created a manhunt of sorts. There were bloodhounds brought out. They did find him the next day.
Another rescue attempt.
Another rescue attempt. And someone had tried to throw him over the bluffs at the Green River, hoping he'd never be found again.
Okay.
He was found. He was brought back and returned to the cave. But Dr. Thomas had a solid top put on him.
Okay.
He put even log chains around it to keep that from happening. There were enough links in that log chain that you could still let people see by lifting the lid just a little bit.
Okay.
Morbid to think, why would you want to see this man? Let him rest in peace. But yet, there's still that curiosity I think we all have.
Well, especially if it had been such a huge news story
Yes,
for these people who had now traveled to see.
right.
It takes a
Probably.
long time even for us today to get here.
Right.
So
I kind of equate it to like when they had some of the mummies on display. Not just the Egyptian mummies, but the mummies at Mammoth Cave
Yeah.
that were on display. It's that curiosity of what are they like? Let them rest in peace.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
the big thing.
Yeah. And Floyd is now.
He is, finally. The Collins family petitioned. The Crystal Cave, this property was one of the last two inholdings within Mammoth Cave National Park. As this park was established, Great Onyx Cave and Crystal Cave were the two pieces of property that were worth far more than what the state of Kentucky could pay to get the land secured to make Mammoth Cave a national park. Even though these properties were condemned, the state of Kentucky still had to pay for them to come under the Park Service. And Great Onyx Cave managed to hold on until June or July of 1961. But for Crystal Cave and the Collins property, it came in like June of 1960.
Okay.
Yes.
And Floyd was still in the
He
cave
was still in the cave
in
at that point.
1960.
The Collins family began petitioning the park to have him removed, to give him a proper burial. And in 1989, that became a reality.
Okay.
It was from the 60s until finally
Until
80.
1989.
Wow.
Well,
In
and
1989, he was finally brought out of the cave.
Okay.
The Flint Ridge Road out here was closed down during this time to allow Park Service and family to get Floyd put in a proper grave, and for the Collins family to have a proper final burial for him.
that's very touching.
It is.
I mean, it is. Because if I'm doing all the math right, of course, he died in 25. Dr. Thomas bought this.
1927.
So he had been in the cave basically since 1927,
Yes.
except for the detour.
Except for the week or a few days that,
He was
He had-
near the river again.
yes.
Wow. And then you said he is buried now at Mammoth Cave
Mammoth Cave
Baptist,
Baptist Church.
in the cemetery there, and that happened in 1989.
Yes, ma'am.
That's a significant portion,
That's quite a few years.
decades.
Yeah.
52 years.
Yeah.
You know, it really brings a different slant to the phrase "rest in peace,"
Yes.
because you know Floyd's life after death. No, Floyd's existence after death was so tumultuous.
It almost seemed to be at the point of he's still being used as this sideshow attraction, because Sand Cave, I don't know that there was ever tours into Sand Cave, but there were all these signs along the roadways for it. There's men standing out there with the rock
Oh, of
that
course.
trapped him. There are men standing out there with the lantern he used, his shoes that he used.
So it became its own sideshow.
It was a sideshow, but once again, this is a period of time where everyone in this area is struggling.
Sure,
Yeah.
Survival meant everything.
sure.
You want to leave your ancestral lands, you got to figure out. If you don't want to do that, you got to figure out how to survive.
Yeah. Had this happened in a different time period or setting, it may not have been as tumultuous of a time.
Probably, if it happened today, it would not be.
Yeah.
And whenever I do my evening program about this entrapment, they know, this is quite the obsession. February will mark 100 years of his passing and that event, that tragedy that happened there at Sand Cave. And there's still such an obsession with it where people want to know. And that in itself is incredible. This fella still has impact
Yeah.
100 years later.
Yeah.
And why do you think that is? What do you think it is about the Floyd Collins story that still has us fascinated?
That spirit of exploration, self-reliance, I think are the big things that kind of bring people in, we still want that. Our lives a lot of times have diverged because maybe technology or the jobs that we have to do to survive sometimes don't allow us for that spirit of exploration.
That tenacity.
Absolutely.
I just think about how tenacious he must have been,
He was incredible.
to have always been pushing through and always been seeing what was next.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I would say that you have that nailed
Yeah,
correctly.
not being afraid of what he is about to discover, possibly.
Right. I think for him, a lot of it was the wanting to know what's next.
Yeah.
What's around the bend? What's around this next bend up here? I think that is that curiosity to want to know, where does this go? And I think that's pretty incredible on his part. And he had the iron grit.
Evidently.
And too, being able to travel somewhere that no one else had ever been.
To be the first to set foot.
Yeah.
We talk about the moon, or now we're talking, in the 50s and 60s, it was all about the moon. Now it's about Mars.
Yeah.
This is still one of those places that the average person won't always get to see. We can't see it from the surface. You have to go in and push not just the boundaries, but your own boundaries if you want to know what's going on.
Yeah.
And that's also incredible. This cave got a lot of attention before it came under the Park Service. Probably one of the biggest things that led to the connection of this cave with Mammoth Cave started out as one of the greatest con jobs in history, because Bill Austin and his uncle, Dr. Pohl, they were having the National Speleological Society annual convention. That's a group of cavers. They're having it right here in the Mammoth Cave area. You've got, Bill was probably in his 50s at the time, Dr. Pohl much older, and they were like, hey, we got this cave you might want to check out. So they took them over to Hidden River Cave. Oh, that's nice. Took them to Mammoth. Oh, yeah, this is nice. I don't think that they probably wouldn't want to do another cave. What do you got? Well, come on out and we'll talk about it. And Bill and a guy named Jack Lehrberger took 4 or 5 guys on an 18-hour, 16-hour trip.
Wow.
And that started the birth, truly, of the Cave Research Foundation, which still does active exploration to this day.
Yeah.
It started right here. This Floyd's house was a field house. This area was used for, this ticket office had bathrooms and a shower. So this is truly where that ultimate exploration, that desire has continued.
Ground zero.
Ground zero.
And the Cave Research Foundation, they are the ones responsible annually for reporting how much more of Mammoth Cave has been discovered, correct?
Yes.
And
they are underground starting this either later today or tomorrow. Thanksgiving expedition
okay.
begins. And they'll be here through Sunday.
They spend hours and days.
Hours, days.
And
still with that same spirit of, I want to see what's around the next curve.
And pretty much, I know we can't say always, but there's pretty much always annually some amount of feet, inches, whatever
Right.
that is added to the length of Mammoth Cave, which is the longest known cave system in the world currently, each year by the Cave Research Foundation. So, or is that correct?
That's
It's
correct.
pretty much, they pretty much always succeed in finding more.
A little bit more each and every trip.
Yeah. And then the things that have been found recently with the fossils and the shark fossils and there's so much to explore down there.
Oh, exactly.
And bringing it back to Floyd, I was just thinking, one of the tragedies of his death is that people may have not known everything he had learned.
Right.
You know, if he's talking about Sand Cave being black down there, then he understood a great deal about prehistoric uses of the cave and things like that. You think about how much he had seen. I hope he shared with someone all that he had learned about human behavior prior to what he was seeing.
Hopefully,
Yeah.
but doubtfully.
Yeah. So that's another piece of the tragedy, right?
Right.
Is that, we lost.
How much of his knowledge of the cave itself was lost with his death?
Yeah. How old was Floyd? when he died?
37.
37.
So young.
Wow.
So very young still.
Yeah. And so, yeah. Well, thank you so much
You're welcome. Thank you
for
all.
sharing with us about Floyd and all you have come to know. And is there anything we've missed that asking you that you think, oh, yeah, those listeners are going to want to know that?
The one thing that I keep thinking about, that time, and people that couldn't even get here were sending donations.
Oh,
$1, $3, $5.
that's a fascinating.
There's a couple that sent like $20. And I think about 1920s, that was a lot of money.
That's a
for
big
people.
deal.
And these people, the ones that are giving like $1 or $2, they're embarrassed that that's all they can give.
Mm.
But they may not have physically been able to get here.
Mm-hmm.
But they still wanted to help in some small way.
It's
And
touching.
it's amazing what that $1 or $2 went to help feed
Mhm.
the people that were here actually
Yeah.
struggling, trying to get Floyd out.
That's really touching. And so it wasn't just the community. It wasn't just Floyd's community that was behind him.
It was everyone.
It was the whole nation.
There was, I came across one letter from a fella in San Diego, sent like $5. He was not very happy with the way things were going. he chastised basically all the locals for making Lee Collins have to spend his own money to get his son out.
Yeah.
But still, here's the $5.
Right.
You've got church groups. You've got church groups in Tennessee, Alabama, and Texas that are sending donations that are between $50 and $60.
Wow.
And that had to be a tremendous amount of money for those churches.
Yeah.
Sure.
Send. But they wanted to do
Yeah.
something.
Mhm.
Yep.
That's very touching for the people to want to contribute to helping Floyd get to a place of being buried on his family's property.
Right.
Is there any notations about how much that actually did cost the Collins family for the retrieval?
I don't have that number. I don't
Yeah.
think I've ever come across it anywhere.
Yeah. I'm sure it was significant for that time.
Oh, I'm sure it was
It would
too.
be any time.
There was something that came across one of the articles. It was taking something like $1,000, maybe every 4 or 5 days, to feed the people that were actually working
Wow.
During the rescue
during
portion.
the rescue portion of it.
That was so much money back
And-
in 1925.
Oh, a tremendous amount. That might as well be $100,000.
Sure.
You know,
It's fascinating. It was a totally different time.
it was.
And had the cave wars not been in action, it would have probably been even different. All the things that play into everything that happens with any of our lives,
Absolutely.
but really different. Thank you so much for
Thank you all.
not just the explanation of like what happened during the entrapment, but Floyd's experiences after his death, if that's the way to say it, and also helping us understand what the culture here was like leading up to and enduring. So it's been great talking to you.
Thank you all.
Yeah, thanks for coming and hanging out with us.
Glad to do it.